as many. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, sir. There's a very good friend of mine whose name, well, first, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just want to say publicly thanks to the people of the staff, teacher, and principal at Sandlands Primary School who had their prize giving today. And this plaque was given to me as a result of my support of the school. And I say that because the central focus of my representation, and I continue to say it, is the Sandlands Primary School. Because my own view is that the 650 or so students who are centered there are the future of Fox Hill. And if they get a proper grounding and education when they start in those formative years in primary school, then they're good to go essentially for the rest of their lives. And so I want to thank them, and in thanking them, to say how much I appreciate that it made it into the plank of the Progressive Liberal Party's platform for the next 5 years, that we will double the investment in education, and part of that doubling of investment will be, I trust, a significant investment in Sandlands Primary School, and thereby assuring the future of the people of the Fox Hill community. And so congratulations to all those young boys and girls who will now go on to middle school or to junior high, and I wish them every success in their studies. There is a very good friend of mine who I've known from I was canvassing in the Roll Avenue area. I guess that used to be part of the area that the former Speaker, Sir Arlington Butler, who's in the gallery, used to represent. Roll Avenue is just off Mackey Street in the area of St. George's Park, and her name is Norma Heald. And she is a public servant, works, I believe, in the Ministry of Finance. And I was thinking to myself as I was trying to identify what is my philosophy behind this whole business of public spending and budgets, that she is someone who could very easily be a Minister of Finance, because she's an economist in her own right, like Keynes. She is one of the best financiers that I know. She began with a small home. She's now expanded it to a larger home. She knows how to negotiate and how to save, how to bargain and how to build, how to cut back in bad times, and how to provision for her children. So when I think about the economics of our country and our country's affairs, I take off my hat to someone like her and say to her that any Minister of Finance could easily take a page out of her book, because the principle that she operates on, and this is remarkable, no matter what happens, she's always negotiating a way forward. Never say die. That's her principle. Never say die, no matter what the circumstances. And that is what the PLP is saying in this budget. Never mind what circumstances we found ourselves in. Yeah. Never say die.
Yeah. Never say die.
And, you know, there was an address, I believe it was Churchill who gave this address, I'm told, at one of these colleges, and they thought he was going to get up and make a profound statement. And they were sitting there at this commencement exercise expecting him to go on for some time. And he got up, I'm told, and said, this was his address: never give up, never give up, never give up. And then he sat down. And that, again, is the axiom which drives us philosophically. Never give up. Patrice Lumumba said it another way: forward ever, backward never. Forward ever, backward never. And so this budget for the people of Fox Hill should expect some progress to finish our community center, hopefully the preschool for Sandilands Primary School. And we know that preschools are important if children are going to get a jump on their education. They need to go into the first grade with a good 1 year behind them of preschool education. And we are committed to working toward that end. The catchment area for the East is served only by one public preschool at the moment. That preschool is the Thelma Gibson Primary School, which can take 40 students max in any year. That clearly cannot serve the catchment area, and there is a need for expansion of the public preschool system. And then to the development of the Eastwood Park, the development of Fox Hill Village as a touristic center, including the Ocean Hole, around which many young Fox Hillians spent their time playing, their childhood playing, perhaps can be developed into a public park. Long time ago, when I was contemplating a return to the Progressive Liberal Party, I happened to be sitting in the home of the late Beryl Hannah, the home also of the now and former Governor General Arthur Hannah. And I was speaking, it was a reception, to the wife of the now Prime Minister. I was speaking to Mrs. Bernadette Christie. And she said words like this: "You must come back to the PLP." And so I was sitting there looking at her, and she said, "You know, what I want is to be able to pick up the phone. You came back to the PLP, and you got into the House of Assembly. I'd like to be able to pick up the phone and call you and say, someone needs some help, and know that you are able to help that person." And that always stayed with me. It remains an axiomatic sentiment. We are here to do things to help people. We asked for this job, and we will find a way to do it, even though our opponents may have maxed out the national credit card and left us little space to maneuver. But they are not as clever as they think. They are not as clever as they think. My regret is that we did not have the time to do what the rules contemplate, and that is for a select committee of the House to examine the appropriations bills before their presentation to this forum for a vote, and thereby in public hearings call the public officials who can tell the real story of how those folk who preceded us ran the government, what they spent, and how they spent it, how their choices came about, and how we came to make the choices that we had to make. You know, some people will never believe, no matter what I say, because they say I'm colored with politics. So let's get the public officials out there, and they can tell the story, the real story, of what happened and why it happened. Each time I make an intervention in the House of Assembly, there's a video clip of my statement, which a friend of mine kindly provides. And like those coaches in the NFL who look at the film after the videotape after the game to determine how you did, what you said, did you make your point, was your message delivered properly, were the points reached, I review the tapes. I also study the interventions of others, everyone who speaks, to find out what was their point, friend or foe. Find out what was their point. Did they make their point? What was in the point? And do I have to take some cognizance of the point? And I thought last week, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the member for Fort Charlotte, in his maiden address, amongst others, acquitted himself well, and there is great promise there. And I mention him because, in particular, because I'm a bit of a history buff, and I like, in public policy matters, to add the context to where we are. Shakespeare says the past is prologue. And what was important about that intervention by the member was that it put into context where we are today and the opponents we face. It could not have been said any better. And sometimes they say, out of the mouths of babes and sucklings. Then there was the Member of Parliament for Montague. In a word, to use the favorite word of the Member of Parliament for Centerville, his intervention was extraordinary. And I'm seeking here to be charitable. When I examined it, I thought to myself that the best way to express it is that there is clearly a great divide, a cultural difference, a gulf, in fact, between where we are, that is the 37 of us, and the one of him. As far as I can detect and tell, despite the differences in political sides, culturally, we all appear to be at one with who we are and what we are, the 37, and he alone stands alone. An example, most of us, even sort of dyed-in-the-wool secularists like myself, quoted liberally from the Bible and gave thanks to God, and then to their families. Let's review the tape of the member for Montague. Most of all, defended the record of their party in this place and tried to make points about the policies of the country. Let's examine the tape on the member for Montague. Most of all, unqualifiedly congratulated the Speaker of the House. Let's examine the tape on the member for Montague. The Member of Parliament for Montague came into this place and took us back, not to the last F&M government, went past that last F&M government, past the last PLP government, past the 10 years of the previous F&M government, and then past the 25 years of the previous PLP government, all the way back to 1967, to defend and uphold the dreaded UBP. As Michael Manley once said, unrepentant.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Montague. Can you state the point of order, please?
Yes, at no time, Deputy Speaker, did I seek to defend the record of any previous administration. I was simply directing my attention to the fact that a major proposal was prepared in 1967 for the redevelopment of the entire Grantstown area, and I was pointing out that nothing, as far as I could determine, had been done since that date by this PLP government. Nothing. And that is what I brought to the attention of the House. So for my learned friend, my friends on the other side, to seek to suggest that there was anything other than that about this, then they are sorely mistaken. And Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Fox Hill,
The honourable member for Fox Hill.
The honourable member for Fox Hill is really out of place in making such a statement. Clearly, all I was dealing with was the fact that this proposal was submitted to this House, certainly to the leader of the PLP in 1967, and nothing had been done since that date as far as I can see, not only in Grantstown, but all of these areas such as Kemp Road and so on, which I represent. And when you look at the conditions in those places, and the deputy leader seeks to talk about removing outside toilets from Grantstown and so on, they have neglected these people, and that is what I'm trying to put across to this House.
Thank you. I do not accept that as a point of order, but I would accept it as an offer of explanation as to some point of your speech that was misunderstood. Thank you. Can you continue, please, Honourable Member for Fox Hill?
The beauty about speeches and the beauty about a place like this is that we are permitted to draw our conclusions from what people say. You don't have to say it directly. You don't have to defend it directly. It's what you say. I just spent some time talking about context. I mean, we're not stupid, and we don't think he's stupid either. We know he knows how to say it, and so I know what conclusions to draw, and I'm free to draw the conclusions. From your point of view, I may well be out of order, but, you know, in a free forum, I'm entitled to be out of order too. But as Michael Manley once said, unrepentant, unreconstructed, and unapologetic. There's a cultural difference, clearly. And so, we go all the way back there. We shall see how this unfolds. And, of course, his side must say whether or not they themselves embrace that message. One thing, though, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one thing I want to say. I'm going to say it over again. The 10th of January, no matter what happens, no matter what goes forward, and no matter what we say afterwards, the 10th of January, 1967 did happen. It did happen. And there is nothing that can be done to change that. Nothing. The fact is that Pindling beat back the forces in 1967.
And that's for sure.
He defeated them. Defeated them. And, you know, you raised, Member of Parliament, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the member for Fort Charlotte raised the whole point about this editorial that was done afterwards. You know, there's always this rewrite of history, trying to spin this into some story that it wasn't and say all these bad things about Pindling and what he was and wasn't and so on. You know, the problem is too late. He beat you. He beat you. It don't matter. He beat you in 1967, and that cannot change. Cannot change. The rest is history. So let's get on with the 21st century now. Let's get on with the 21st century. I wish, Mr. Speaker, to address the matters relating to the Department of Immigration. The points I'd wish to cover are the expenditure projections of 2012 and 2013 and the revenue expectations, service improvements, and initiatives. Now, to begin with, I want to say that the overall mission or statement of the Department of Immigration is to regulate the movement of people across the borders of the Bahamas so as to ensure the security, facilitate economic advancement, and promote the harmonious social development of the Bahamas. And therein, Mr. Deputy Speaker, lies a dilemma by any minister vested in law with the powers of an immigration minister. On the one hand, the minister is expected to protect the Bahamian labor force. On the other hand, some of that same Bahamian labor force wishes, needs, and demands foreign labor. On the one hand, the work permit regime was put in place as a way to restrain and regulate access of foreign labor to this market. But on the other hand, the work permit regime adds almost $50 million to the annual revenue of the country. When I spoke last week, I made a general pledge to enforce the immigration laws. And I make that pledge today, and I think I can make no greater pledge. In doing so, I pledge to work with the labor minister to protect and enhance the Bahamian workforce and to seek to prevent illegal immigrants from overtaking our country. I said last week, and I again say today, illegal migration is a clear, discernible issue with well-known solutions which require money and manpower. And the government has provided money and manpower. What concerns me, though, is that while we're focusing on illegal immigration, and I say that much is clear, what concerns me is I don't think we're paying enough attention to independence. We have the number of work permit holders that we have in the construction sector, the banking sector, the tourism sector. And it is that sentiment which informs my decision-making. See, this take the construction sector. It's not a new problem, because if you read the history books again, I think the British colonial was constructed in 1922. Artisans had to be brought in from outside to build the British colonial because there were no Bahamians, they said, to do the work. Windsor Field, 1942. Again, that's what caused the Burma Road riots, because Bahamian workers were working cheek and jowl with American workers constructing that project down there at Windsor Field. And you come right up through the ages, and you see each time there's a major construction project, we always, as a country, seem unprepared for the Bahamian workforce, which is unemployed, to take up the jobs which are brought about as a result of these huge projects. The latest one now is the Lyndon Pindling International Airport, where, again, I sit in the first couple of weeks as a Minister for Immigration, and I'm asked to approve work permits, and I know people are sitting at home who can do drywall construction, and I'm being asked to approve work permits for drywall construction.
And you will not.
Further, I say to myself that if the big establishments, and this is the other side of the coin now, if the big establishments can get the workers that they want, and you'd be surprised, we understand that one of the phone company has 40 work permit holders.
One of the phone companies.
One of the phone companies, yes. But that's on the one hand.
They gave it.
And I say to myself, if the big establishments can get the workers they want from the outside, what about the ordinary citizen? And there are many, many ordinary citizens who want work permits for their maids, for their gardeners, for their handyman. So on the one hand, then, you're sitting there turning back work permits, you say, to protect Bahamian jobs for the big guys and the big guys, and then the small guy, or you're giving them because they say they need them. But you're telling the small person they can't get the work permit, they must find someone in the country to do the work. And I ask myself, with the thousands of young women out of work in the Bahamas and young men, why are there so many work permits being granted for housekeepers? So, needless to say, the Minister of Labor and myself will have to have a chat. There are several key points I wanted to highlight in reference to the expenditure. The total expenditure is just over $20 million. The personal emoluments, and including national insurance for the Immigration Department, will amount to about $14 million. There's a need for the detention center facilities to be improved, and if there's capital expenditure approved on that, that will be another $1 million. There's $1 million in the recurrent expenditure, which is set aside for the repatriation of illegal immigrants, and another $250,000 or so for the upkeep of the detention center. Last year, as I said, the revenue for the department was $45 million projected, and this year it's about $40 million. And the department will be looking at, and I had discussions as recently as this morning, because we have to work closely with the financial services sector, which is looking at a number of products which the country markets for non-nationals to come to our country to invest at certain levels, and the commitment of a turnaround time in a specific time period. So we have to discuss those matters and make sure that if those programs continue, that whatever we sell overseas, that it actually meets the deadlines that we say. And in our charter, the PLP committed to review and respond to short-term, said that it would review and respond to short-term work permits within 3 days. This is a target again, and an annual work permit within 2 weeks. The question of applicants for spousal permits, the idea is that the applicants will be dealt with in a dignified, respectful manner while ensuring that the system is not abused. And resident spousal permits, the idea is to give these for 7 years instead of the now 5 years. And the feeling is because you have a 5-year period to qualify for permanent residence, that there should be this 2-year window which allows for the processing and due diligence, and then you'd be able to get permanent residence if you're a spouse of a Bahamian. I want to make it clear that we will place a renewed focus on enforcement and deal with this whole question of enforcement in a strict manner, but will be done methodically and in a humane manner. As I mentioned in an earlier interview, in the case of Haitian cases, we very much wish to get to the root of this problem. And when I come to foreign affairs, talk about trying to revive the whole idea of a joint commission with the Haitian government to see if we can together try and deal with this issue of illegal migration from the Republic of Haiti. The detention center located on Golden Isles Road, off Carmichael Road, which was created in 1994, needs substantial improvement. And there are, as I said, recommendations already made about the level of spending which will be required to do this. And the parliamentary secretary has taken it upon herself, the member of parliament for South Beach. She's taken a tour of those facilities, and we will be together working to see how we can access the resources to improve this facility, which is out there off Carmichael Road. I want to also say that we have a commitment arising out of the general elections to deal with a number of outstanding labor issues which resulted in customs and immigration officers staging industrial strikes for a little over a week. So without going into the details of the matters which are outstanding, again, this is a matter which the Minister of Labor and myself will be seeking to resolve. I've spoken to Mr. Sloan Smith, who is the head of the union. He's the vice president of the union, and with a view to meeting at an early opportunity to see if we can get this matter resolved on the question of their industrial agreement. I want to thank the many immigration officers and non-uniform staff of the Department of Immigration, headed by Mr. Jack Thompson, and they are spread out throughout the length and breadth of this country for their hard work and dedication to the service. Many of these officers make great sacrifices to protect our vast borders and to welcome our visitors and returning residents to the Bahamas. And I look forward to a productive working relationship with immigration staff as we continue our efforts to build a stronger Bahamas. If I may turn briefly to foreign affairs. The basis in the Charter for Governance, Mr. Speaker, of the plank on foreign affairs is a white paper which was prepared by the Progressive Liberal Party's internal committee on foreign affairs and foreign trade, which I had the honor to chair, co-chair with the Member of Parliament for Elizabeth. This paper was concluded in 2006. The work done by them, 2010, yeah, sorry, it was 2010. And the work was done by, amongst others, Yuri Kemp, Alcott Colby, a number of Carlos Smith, a number of other Bahamians who describe themselves in this place as the next generation. And I say that in contradistinction to myself, because I must be The current generation. I wasn't sure what you call this, you know. So now that I know, I'm now the current generation. But they largely drove the work. It was an interesting exercise to me, and so the work of that internal committee found its way into the platform of the Progressive Liberal Party. And it provides the basis of the philosophical thrust of the Charter. And it is this, that foreign trade and foreign affairs will drive the economy in the Bahamas in the 21st century. And you see it working itself out now because one of the authors of the report is in fact now the minister responsible for foreign trade. So we will watch as this all unfolds, and he's busy and aggressively going after that agenda, as you just heard. To this end, in my view, there must be a reformation of the central attitude of the foreign ministry, which in my view is, and that central attitude that is to ensure that its primary focus is that the Bahamian citizen, whether as a businessman or woman or a visitor, has a seamless or hassle-free experience as he or she moves around the world. I said on the first meeting with the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I want, when that Bahamian passport is presented at the desk, wherever it is, at any border in the world, that the Bahamian citizen will have a seamless and hassle-free experience. So everything that we do at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs should be dedicated to that end. In addition, the ministry must be transparent, open, and accountable to the public for whom it works, and the rubric in this case, the public, also includes the press. So the ministry has got to be open. Whatever happens in the country, whatever its policies are, whatever the minister is doing, whatever the prime minister is doing, ought to be open and to the press and to the public. And the previous, when I was minister, the opposition spokesman on foreign affairs knew that at any point in time he had access to the public officials at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because it's a ministry which is accountable to the public, and the public includes the spokesman for the opposition. Now, if you'll permit me a bit of fun, that was not what was extended to me, but, you know, we won't hold that against you, because that's the way the system in my training was supposed to operate, because it should be seamless. If we lose office today and you come in tomorrow, you should not be, if you are the Minister of Foreign Affairs, scrapping around to find out what has happened. You should know, or have a fair idea. Obviously, you can't know what all the policy considerations are, because those are in camera. But you shouldn't have to be feeling your way around. We also need a more forceful interaction with civil society in shaping the work we do and developing our interface with the international community. There was a civil society group which was, I think it's still headed by Terry Miller today, and their work has sort of fallen to the side. They've been to one or two conferences, but out of the CARICOM strictures, there was a requirement. The Charter for Democracy of CARICOM required that countries interact with civil society on a formal basis and consult them from time to time on matters to do with foreign policy. And as a result, we provided a forum, a place for civil society to meet in the ministry every month, and they discussed topics of national interest about the development of policy. And I would like to return to that. In doing so, we hope to provide, as we move forward, an expanded network of honorary consuls, including, for the first time and in the first instance, an honorary consul in Johannesburg, South Africa. And we hope to conclude a visa abolition agreement for all Bahamians traveling to South Africa soon. Our major ally and trading partner is the United States of America, and this will remain unchanged, and the focus will be unchanged and immutable. We will have a more dynamic interface with CARICOM countries and are considering a High Commission in Kingston to deal with CARICOM and EU matters, since most EU delegations serve the Bahamas from Kingston. Within the budget for this year, there is a line item for operational expenses for an office in Geneva. We expect that this office will come on stream within the next fiscal year. Planning must also begin for an embassy in Brazil. Brazil is a key market for financial services, the financial services sector. Some of the financial services sector entities in the country have reported that as much as 40% of the business on their books now comes from Brazil, and they need an official presence to help support the work which they are doing there in Latin America. We hope to restart talks with the Haitian Republic on the question of a treaty between us to establish a joint commission to review issues between us. We expect that all ambassadors and heads of mission serving overseas will have been recalled within the next 90 days, and that the nominees for these positions should be in place upon the expiry of those 90 days. I want to thank all those who serve overseas, at home, in the ministry for their work. And I thank those who have been loyal to their country, who are Bahamian patriots, and who have not forgotten their oath of office to bear true allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen and to serve this country, not a foreign state. We are a small country with no known enemies, but we fight for our independence in ways large and small every day. Those who work in foreign affairs are in the front line of the army. When we forget our oath of office, we become traitors to our country. This country is all we have. You know, I was talking to one of the diplomats from the developed countries, and I was remarking that one of the strictures being imposed by us as an independent country was the fact that we had to carry out changes to our laws, put in place new institutions, hire new people, increased expenditure, and this is burdensome for a small country. And his reply was, you are the ones who wanted to be independent. So if you want to be independent, if you can't afford it, you can go back and be a colony of Britain. But if you want to be independent, you got to pay for it, and that's the price of your independence. So I have my marching orders. We fight for our independence every day. The Bahamians who work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are on the front line of that battle, and they help to defend and protect our country every day in the things which they do. The passport office is one of the other areas which interfaces with the public, and I hope that the public is satisfied with the service which the passport office offers to the Bahamian public. I have not myself been made aware of any complaints about delays in the delivery of the passports. I would say, Mr. Speaker, to members, I think this happened for ministers of the government yesterday, that the passport office is prepared in the case of members of Parliament who are entitled all to official passports and have not gotten those passports. The passport office will make themselves available next week here at the House of Assembly to facilitate anyone who wishes to carry out that function, including the forms. All you would need to do is to bring the photographs and your national insurance cards, but the forms and everything will be facilitated here at the House of Assembly for all members of Parliament. Later this year, we will continue our negotiations with the United States of America in Washington, D.C. to secure the maritime boundaries and to ensure the protection and sustainable use of our marine resources. You know, for example, that we have concluded the maritime boundaries with the Republic of Cuba to the west of ourselves, and there are negotiations which still must be done to conclude with the United States. And of course, to our southern border is the Turks and Caicos Islands. And speaking of the Turks and Caicos Islands, I want to say just briefly on my feet that I was recently made aware of a detailed statement made by the Anglican bishop on Monday in the Turks and Caicos Islands about the state of the politics and the civil society in the Turks and Caicos, having regard to the fact that there is no direct democracy in the Turks and Caicos Islands. You would be aware that CARICOM has issued statements on a number of occasions about their concerns about the fact that there is no direct democracy in the Turks and Caicos Islands, and have prevailed or sought to prevail upon the British for the early return of direct democracy to the Turks and Caicos Islands. The Anglican Church statement describes the situation in the Turks and Caicos Islands as tense, and they have appealed to the British to act with dispatch to return direct democracy to the Turks and Caicos Islands. We are studying that statement. We have our own concerns about the state in the Turks and Caicos Islands, but I want to proceed carefully before saying anything further than that, except to say that we support the CARICOM position with regard to the Turks and Caicos Islands. They are obviously close to us. There are many people of Turks and Caicos Island descent who live in New Providence and in Grand Bahama and throughout our islands. And they have been appealing to us, both in opposition and now in government, to use our best offices to see whether there can be a speedy return to democracy in the Turks and Caicos Islands. But I must say that I was extremely concerned, given the statement by the Anglican Church, because it is in such strong terms, that the matter is something which we must examine for the good of those people who are our kith and kin in the Turks and Caicos Islands. The Bahamas High Commission in London. We own a building called in Chesterfield Street, which is called Bahamas House, number 10 and number 11 Chesterfield Street. There will have to be significant repairs with that building. The building is a significant piece of real estate. I'm again hoping, in connection with real estate, to revisit the issue of the support for the Association of Bahamians who live in New York. There is a house in Harlem at 137th Street, which we had made a decision prior to our leaving office in 2007 to support the Bahamians abroad in the development of that project. That project was abandoned. The house still remains there. And there is part of the remit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is to engage with the Bahamian diaspora abroad. Now, the largest group, we believe, of Bahamians who live abroad are the Bahamians who live in Miami. You just have to visit a church like St. Agnes Church in Miami, in Overtown. And when they do the announcements at the time right after the sermon, and hear the names Cunningham and McKenzie and McKinney and Hannah and you'll know that you are actually in a Bahamian church. In fact, the church itself was founded out of a congregant from St. Agnes here in Nassau in the late 19th century. And we see it as an important aspect of our work to continue the thrust of engagement with the diaspora overseas, the largest group of which I say is in Miami. But back in the 1930s, the people who started the Bahamas American Association were able to buy this very valuable piece of land in Harlem, now worth well over $1 million in its unimproved state. The association was in fact founded by a group of men from Andros in the early 20th century, in and around 1909, 1910, because they believed that they were not getting sufficient support from the British Council at the time, the Bahamas still being a colony. And they were able to get sufficient resources so that by the 1930s they were able to buy this building. And we just believe that it would be a shame for this building to be lost to Bahamian hands. And it is important for us to support the work, and so we'd like to revisit that issue at the earliest opportunity as an important aspect of supporting the work of Bahamians abroad. The Bahamas High Commission in London also serves the International Maritime Organization and the work that we have for our shipping interests overseas, and it serves, in addition to being the embassy for the UK, it is also the embassy of the Bahamas for Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, and Greece. And unfortunately, because of the budgetary constraints, we're unable to deal with the travel which that requires. But Brussels, I think, is going to become increasingly an important capital because, of course, the EU is the last of the multilateral organizations that provides the Bahamas with any development assistance. And so Brussels will become increasingly important as that goes on. But I think this is a matter which, of course, will be driven in part by the ministry responsible for foreign trade. This year, the Bahamas and China will celebrate 15 years of the establishment, or it's actually passed because it happened in May, with the establishment of diplomatic relations. And our embassy in Beijing continues to make every effort to further strengthen that relationship and promote mutual understanding between our two countries at this time. And the trade between China and the Bahamas and the dynamic between China and the Bahamas has been growing exponentially in the 15 years or so that we have had diplomatic relations between us. I've already talked about the Haitian-Bahamas idea of the Joint Commission, and right now I want to pay tribute to former ambassador to Haiti, Clifford Scavala, who is the former head of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, who has returned to the Bahamas to help with the largest Security Council work, and I want to thank him for the work which he has done for the Bahamas in that regard. And to thank Ambassador Paulette Bethel for the work which she has done in holding the fort at a very sensitive and comprehensive effort in New York at the United Nations. The United Nations continues to be the central focus of the multilateral contacts between the Bahamas government and the rest of the world. You will see from the line items when we go through the heads that each year the provisions for UN membership continue to become more expensive, and one of the items which may stick out to you is the allocation of $1 million for UN peacekeeping operations. So even though we're not involved in those peacekeeping operations, as part of our obligation as UN members, we do have to pay for the upkeep of those peacekeeping operations wherever they are in the world. And the Bahamas Maritime Authority continues to expand its work in the Bahamas. It is actually a part of the Ministry of Transport, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs works closely with the Bahamas Maritime Authority in London in pushing this trade agenda which we have been talking about. So, in sum, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say that when you look at the portfolio as a whole is generally concerned with the defense of the Bahamas. And in doing so, we must pull out all the stops to ensure that this country we have remains intact and remains a safe and secure place for Bahamians to work and live. Despite all of the philosophizing and the contradictions and the dilemmas, sitting in the chair, one has to exercise discretion and balance in order to reach the objectives of the government, which will help the larger country. And I look forward over the ensuing year at tackling first immigration as a new part of the a portfolio which I've not had before, and in working to develop the protection of the Bahamian labor market on the one hand, but at the same time ensuring that our country has the necessary skills to develop and move forward, because no country can, of course, develop in isolation. And in terms of foreign affairs, as I say, to ensure that wherever Bahamians go, and they flash that passport, they say, welcome, pass through. You are welcome to our country because you are Bahamian. Thank you very much, and God bless you.